Hello again, and let's see what is this SIS1 requirements elicitation is. Now in the first video, I clearly mentioned that SIS1 comprises of requirements elicitation, and I also gave you a very brief idea about what is system requirements elicitation. Now I'll explain what is system requirements elicitation and what are all the various baseline practices that comprise of requirements elicitation. In a very layman language, this is the first point of contact with an AEM for a tier 1 company. When you are working on a tier 1 company, it may be Bosch or Continental or Aptiv or Hella or Forvia. When you approach a OEM, this is the first point of contact. OEM approaches you with a list of requirements. Okay, so understand this carefully that this is the first point of contact or first step of contact with an OEM. Now, what is the process purpose? What is the purpose of this requirements elicitation? The purpose of requirements elicitation process is to gather, process, and track evolving stakeholder needs and requirements throughout the life cycle of the product and or service so as to establish a requirement baseline that serves as a basis for defining the needed work products. I request all of you to read this definition once, twice, thrice, and let me re-emphasize one thing. Each and every word mentioned in this definition is very important. Whether it is gather, process, track, and stakeholder needs, all these words are very clearly selected. So I want all of you to understand these words very carefully. So here you gather, you process, and you track. Track means it is the timeline tracking. Process means how exactly are we going to do. Gather means what. Process means how. Track means when. So all these important parameters are collected here. The word elicitation means you elicit or you gather from the OEM all these requirements and the requirements that need to be embedded into the end product. It may be a product or service. For example, if you are developing some hardware, it can be constituted as a product. Or if it is some kind of service like a software service, then you are developing a software component, then you can constitute it as a service. To establish the requirements baseline that serves as basis for defining the needed work product. Okay, what is meant by work product? The end document. The end document which clearly outlines what are all the various deliverables of the end product. A OEM approaches tier 1 saying that I want such and such a product or such and such a component or such and such a deliverable. And this work product, end work product, clearly outlines what are those deliverables. Now, what is meant by requirement? Of course, anybody who speak reasonable English knows what is meant by requirement. In a very spoken English, you know what is requirement. But in the perspective of this requirements system engineering, requirement is a feature that the system must have or constraint that it must satisfy to be accepted by the client. Now, this requirement elicitation is important whether you are developing a ADAS feature or a feature in body control module or a feature in transmission control module or a feature in engine control module. So in an automobile, I'm talking about strictly automobile. Actually, the system engineering can be used in various verticals. It may be in automobile or aerospace or construction, or even medical devices are using system engineering nowadays. But because we are dealing with strictly automotive, this system engineering can be used in various ECUs within the automobile. And within every ECU, there is a requirement, a proper constraint, a proper deliverable that needs to be embedded, that need to be derived. So what are the various practices? Okay, so what are the various steps? And within this SIS1, what are all the various steps? Here, it may appear that I am slightly monotonous because I am going to read one after the other, but I'll read as slowly as possible, and I can emphasize that these definitions are very self-explanatory. They are explained in a very ordinary spoken English, no hi-fi English. So if you follow my speech carefully, you will automatically understand. What is the first base practice? Abstain stakeholder requirements and requests. So here in the first base practice is you need to obtain and define stakeholder requirements and requests through direct solicitation of customer input through review of customer business proposals. All of a sudden you are doing business, there is money involved. So you have to solicit the customer input through the review of customer business proposals wherever it is relevant. What is the time constraint? What is the money involved? What is the budget? Okay, and what is the target operating and hardware environment and other documents bearing customer requirements. Okay, this is the first base practice. Now note 1 and note 2, note 3. Understand these things carefully. Requirement solicitation may involve customer and supplier. Require may, when I say may, most it means most probably it involves customer and supplier, but in very rare cases it can be supplier within to supplier also, or internal from it can be interaction between two internal customers itself. But usually when system insists one, it is from customer to supplier or customer to vendor. The agreed stakeholder requirements and evaluation of any change may be based on feasibility studies or cost and time analysis. The information needed to keep traceability for each customer requirement has to be gathered and documented. The information needed to keep traceability. So what is meant by traceability? Traceability is the procedure through which you clearly understand where things went wrong. You clearly understand not only just where it went wrong, where things went right also. For example, if a feature failed in a particular requirement. For example, again, let me take a car. Let me take car is a basic system. Now, car is very smoothly going from point A to point B. But it is consuming a lot of fuel. So you cannot go through the entire car. You have to clearly understand. You have to clearly trace which exact system is a culprit as far as fuel consumption is concerned. Likewise in software also, when something goes wrong, when some coding or some component goes wrong, you have to clearly understand whether things went wrong in the modeling, if you are developing the code by model based designing, or did anything go wrong during architecture, did anything go wrong during the integration. So you have to clearly trace where exactly things are going wrong. That is the reason why traceability is of such paramount importance. Now, second best practice is understand stakeholder expectations. Ensure that both supplier and customer understand each requirement in the same way. This is very highly important to supplier and the customer are on the same page. For example, if supplier says that they want such a product in 2 years, but you as a vendor, you may say no, this prototyping may take 3 years. So finally, you both of you come to a compromise. So this is what is called understanding the stakeholding expectations and ensuring that both of you are on the same page and both of you are mutually agreeing. Next, base practice 3, agree on the requirements. Obtain an explicit agreement. Understand this word carefully. Explicit. It should be very explicitly, clear-cutly, meticulously agreed of the relevant parties who work on these requirements. That what are all the mutual requirements and what can be expected from each other. Now, what is meant by base practice 4? Establish stakeholder requirements baseline. Formalize the stakeholders' requirements and establish them as a baseline for product use and monitoring against stakeholder needs. So this has to be formally agreed. So once you clearly, explicitly agree, it has to be formalized. There has to be a very formal legal document, a legal work product, which clearly ensures that you understand the stakeholder requirements baseline. Sometimes even the customer can give you a bit of lenience when it comes to requirement. For example, just to give you a crude example, a OEM who approaches a fuel pump manufacturer may say that my fuel consumption should be somewhere between 12 miles per gallon to 10 miles per gallon. So then your baseline becomes 12 miles per gallon. It should not come below that, or 10 miles per gallon. It should not come below that. So that is called baseline requirement. And what is meant by what is the last base practice? Manage the stakeholder requirements changes. Now, everybody who has experience in the industry knows that even though stakeholder requirements are clearly understood, as the time progresses, stakeholder requirements they change. They are transient. They are not rigid. They are transient. Now, management all the changes made to stakeholder requirements against the stakeholder requirement baseline to ensure technology and stakeholder needs are identified, and that those who are affected by changes or assess the impact and risk to initiate appropriate change control and mitigation actions. So you have to extrapolate. So what might happen in the future? Can new technology come? Can, if at all new technology comes, how to integrate the new technology into this development? All these things where you need to have a mutual agreement that we need to have we are flexible for any stakeholder requirements changes. Actually, the very reason why agile methodology has been developed is to meet this base practice, so that we can accommodate the future stakeholder requirements after the requirements are first explicitly agreed. Okay, so the days where a stakeholder gives a requirement and it stays rigid till the end of the project, those days are gone. Now, even after stakeholder gives a requirement, there's a good chance the stakeholder may further modify the requirements in future. So, to encapsulate that baseline practice 5 is important. And what is this one baseline practice 6? Establish a customer supply query communication mechanism. So there has to be a clear channel of communication, provide means by which the customer can be aware of the status and disposition of the requirement changes, and the supplier can have ability to communicate necessary information, including data in a customer specified language and format. So you must be very clear about the channel of communication. You must be clear about the jargon. It should not happen that if he uses a word and you interpret something, and you use some different word and the customer interprets something. This should not happen. So a clear cut channel of communication must be established, and any changes should be communicated to the customer before implementation, in order that the impact in terms of time, cost and functionality can be evaluated. So these changes can be proposed not only from the customer, it can be proposed from the supplier also. So suppose if supplier comes forward to make a particular change, then customer, it should be informed to the customer, and also the impact in terms of time, cost should be clearly be communicated, so that customer is clear about the implications of your change. This may include joint meetings with the customer or formal communication to review the status of their requirements and requests. The formats of the information communicated by the supplier may include computer-aided design, electronic data exchange. Okay, it may happen through, when you say electronic data exchange, don't get intimidated by this word. It only means email. So it may be with the help of computer-aided design also you may exchange communication. Through email also you can exchange communication. But the point is, a clear channel of communication, I think, is clear point of contact should be clearly established. And what are the process outcomes of this one? As a result of successful implementation of this process, continuation communication with stakeholder established, a clear channel of communication, a clear pathway of communication with the stakeholder, whether internal stakeholder or external stakeholder, is clearly established. We also agree the stakeholder requirements, and which are clearly defined and baselined. A change mechanism is established to evaluate and incorporate changes to stakeholder requirements into baseline requirement based on changing stakeholder needs. A mechanism is established for continuous monitoring of the stakeholder. Now, this is what I mentioned about the transitory the stakeholders. So this mechanism which clearly monitors the transient stakeholder needs is clearly established, and also a mechanism is established for ensuring that customers can easily determine the status and disposition of their requests. So where exactly the development process is going on, and when I, in the first slide, I clearly mentioned that you have to track the development. So that's what it means. You clearly a OEM is very clear about the status of the development, the status quo of the development. Changes arising from changing technology and stakeholders needs are identified, associated risks and their impact are managed. So just to summarize, what are all the end process outcomes? One is communication record, review record, change control record, analysis report, risk management plan, risk mitigation plan, and of course customer requirements. All these are the final output of SIS1. You don't go to SIS2 unless all these documents, all these work products are clearly outlined. Thank you.